Thank you for watching the MAPS Global podcast, where we discuss leadership and culture within the convergence of worship, prayer, and missions in your neighborhood and in the nations.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the MAPS Global podcast. I am your host today for this special episode. We're at AG24. We've got all of our missionaries here from off the field, spending time together, praying, worshiping. We're sitting down with some of our different missions leaders. And so today I've got the honor and privilege of sitting down with Jay, one and only. You may recognize her voice because she was the host of the MAPS Global podcast.
Back in the day,
yeah, back in its prime.
Yeah, it's priming now because you're killing it, bro.
Let's go. But so we're just shooting this quick special episode. Wanted to sit down with Jay because so you may have even watched the episode. She was a MAPS Global podcast, working in our mission school here, a leader in our community in Richmond, Virginia. And then she was the pioneering leader that a year ago went and planted a base in the Levant region.
Let's go, baby.
And so she is our Levant missions base director, guys.
Let's go.
And so we want to sit down and have a quick question or just have a quick conversation.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask, you are not just a missions leader. You're not just a female. Mm-hmm. You're also an African-American missionary on the frontier. You are a black missionary pioneering in an unreached people group. Would love to hear. Tell us just like even from this last year and like what's your experience been and what's the Lord doing in your heart in this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. It's been great to be here with this spiritual family, with my spiritual family and AG. But over the last year, I mean, me and my team, we planted in one of the more difficult regions of the world, just specifically because of crisis, because of threats of war and military and all of that. And so our first 6 months in, we were experiencing the threats of war and invasion and all that stuff from countries around us. And
not little threats either.
Threats, no.
Yeah, like major crisis.
Major crisis for sure. But we've just seen how God just really gathers and calls and sets even prayer in place. We had a prayer meeting scheduled, even that would take place actually right after the crisis happened in October. Yeah. And so things like that are really powerful. But even just my experience on the field, I think one of the things as a black missionary
and let's hear, because right before you say that, could you tell us you've been contending for this word of ascending movement of
sure.
black arrows. And then you've become the word, pioneering the way. Maybe just tell us about that and then get into, your experience.
Yeah, so when I came to MAPS and went through the Frontier Mission School back in 2019 when MAPS first moved to Richmond. And my experience was very different. I was living in, Richmond, a predominantly African-American city, but my experience wasn't that. And I come from Black church and Black house of prayer. And so I was in a bit of a culture shock and did my placement in Eurasia in the global pandemic that turned into race riots. So we ended up coming home a little early from placement. And when we came back to America, it was in race riots. And Richmond was like the capital of that. Yeah. It was actually the image on the Time magazine, the 2020 was the Robert E. Lee statue all tattered.
No,
yeah, it was the Times 2020 image of the year. So it was on the magazine. So it was like, that was Richmond, and I lived right close to the action. We would hear all of the activity, the looting, all of the things. So it was crazy, but it was in that time that God really called me into this spiritual family and said to me, like, these are the people that I'm joining you to. Like, they have what you need to continue in your destiny and the assignments that I've given you. Yeah. And it was a predominantly white community. And that was really hard for me because I was like, I'm from Ohio. I'm like, we're going to go back to Ohio. Yeah. I'm going to do this with people who look like me.
Totally.
Yeah. and I wanted to leave, but God said, this is the spiritual family that I'm joining your destiny to. Wow. And he planted me here. And Mr. R.A., right? R.A. Martinez, he really took me in and under his wing, and we wept together like most of 2020, honestly, just about the racism, the racial tension. And we cried a lot together. And he actually introduced me to who George Lyle was and Betsy Stockton and even Richmond's own Lott Carey. And I started to just like study the student volunteer missions movement and study missions history out of America more specifically, and just how connected Black laborers, Black missionaries were to that story, and even pioneers of missions out of America. And so that really jolted. Like I started writing, I started just like, you know, studying and speaking and praying, and simultaneously God was like raising up language for us as a spiritual family, where we would have 10,000 Black arrows sent out, you know, and that was a word we had been carrying, just Black arrows, meaning just a Black missions movement, that we would be a family who would steward a Black missions movement. That was a part of that was one of our assignments here. And so, we started to God started to draw these arrows here through our Frontier Mission School and just through our community and our church expression. And we just started praying together and telling the stories of our history, of MAP's history, our prophetic history, really around why we feel called to a Black missions movement and why we feel like God has entrusted that to us as one of our assignments. And in the midst of that, I was actually at our Middle East missions base, where the Lord actually presented the assignment to lead in the Levant to me. And I was leading a placement at the time, one of our short-term school teams. And it just, what happened for me was like, well, Lord, this is something that I know that I can't do without you. But it was also something like, well, this is the fulfillment of what I've been praying for. Like, this is the beginning steps. Like, we can't say that we want a Black missions movement and we don't have any Black missionaries on the field. Like, we have to start, to start moving in that direction.
Someone's got to say yes.
Somebody has to say yes. And so by God's grace, I said yes. And it's been amazing. I think the biggest thing that I think even culturally that I think a lot of Black people who feel called to missions think about is like, can I be myself on the field? Like, do I have to, you know, hide, you know? I think even as just being a Black American, which is, there's so many, when I say Black, I'm talking about the African diaspora in general. I'm talking about Black everywhere, right? All over the earth. But being Black in America, you kind of feel like you have to learn how to code switch, is what we call it, you know, like be this way in this type of environment. When you're around these people, you're this way. And one of the things that I've felt that God, you know, as he invited me into this assignment, was speaking to me of like, I made you how I made you. There is deliverance and healing and breakthrough on your life. I want you to be you. And you know me, I'm loud. I'm very charismatic. I'm gonna shout. I'm gonna dance. I'm gonna worship God freely. And I found a place in my assignment to be able to do that, where I didn't have to water who God had actually made me in the expression of how he made me, water it down to fit into something. I never felt I had to fit into something. I felt like God was calling me to be me in the Levant. And I've been so embraced by the church we serve with, by the house of prayer we're building and establishing there. And not just only embraced, but I've been received even healing on the field and have an amazing team. And it even in the difficulty of the assignment, right? Because it's challenging to build in crisis. It's hard to build day and night prayer and worship in the midst of chaos. And even in the midst of that, watching God set apart a sound across the sound out of the Levant, and being a part of that and able to disciple so the singers and the musicians and the young adults, you know, that I get to do life with on a regular basis, and that, you know, that are walking through some of the same things that I remember, you know, in my 20s I had to walk through, that I'm getting now to, like, you know, they make fun of me, but mother a generation for real. That is, like, you know, not something I thought I would be doing with people who didn't look like me, but because God has it spoke to me about being who I am in this region of bringing my culture, my Blackness, and not losing any of those things, but carrying them with me, but under submission to the gospel and who, the person of Christ, and being a Christian in the Sermon on the Mount, but being me. Yeah. He made me how he made me, and I get to express that way. And so as for me, that's been, as far as a Black missionary, that tension of, I know this is not the story of many Black missionaries who have felt the racism on the field and felt the challenge and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that I haven't had those moments, but I have been able to experience freedom in who I am, and I'm not trying to become and that's a dynamic too. I think that for missionaries in general, but we're not trying to become the cultures and the people groups that we're ministering or serving in. Like, you'll never be that. You'll never be what they are. It doesn't matter how well you speak the language, how much you assimilate to the culture, you'll never be them. And for me, that was like the first lesson I felt like that I have learned is like, I'm never gonna be that. And I'm never going to be good enough to be seen to them as that. What I can be is be me. And in doing that, I can honestly say, like, I've been way more embraced. Like, they make fun of my Arabic. I make fun of their English. Like, you know what I mean? It's like in a family context, it's like, you said that weird. And I'm like, I know, I'm never going to say it like you say it, you know? Like, you said that weird. I know, this is my accent. It's just these things that I think, when we think of missions, we think that we're just supposed to like there's this full assimilation into like you become the other culture. And there's a dynamic of full assimilation to some degree, but it's really, you just be who God made you to be in a culture. So I'm living cross-culturally, able to be who God made me to be. And that to me is a big testimony. And that's why I have so much joy. And I'm continuing to say yes in the midst of crisis, because I'm getting a built family with people who have embraced me. And historically, in a country that, Black people in this country are in servant positions. They're in lower class positions. They are nannies. They are, helping the families who can afford to have help and caretakers and stuff like that. Or they're cleaning restaurants and all of that. Like, that's real life. Like, I see that in a day to day, but I'm also simultaneously being loved by these people and embraced in a culture by being myself. And so it's a tension of Antioch, but it's a tension that I'm grateful that I get to lean into. And I have an amazing spiritual family in the Levant, and we're building day and night prayer and worship together. Foreigner and indigenous.
Let's go. That's awesome.
I said a lot.
Man, so. I love that. I love that. And even here on the podcast, I'm like, I've been wanting to ask you this personally. So I'm totally. This is so cool to hear your experience over the last year, because you're pioneering. But the fact that you don't have to suppress who you are, suppress your Blackness, or suppress your personality, like just you getting to be fully you, finding that that's actually something that I'd say maybe is even needed in that community, in that culture, like of you to be yourself, showing up as as who God made you to be, still honoring them, doing some of the cultural assimilation and all that, but that like the testimony that you're getting to be yourself and step into that is like,
if it's freedom, it frees other people up to be them as well. It's like, it's not fake. It's like, I'm gonna be who I am. I grew up in the hood. I grew up inner city. Like I'm never gonna be, this nice cookie cutter box and like perfect missionary. Honestly, I'm the last one who would have been a missionary. It was none of my list. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Like, God plucked me out of the fire and picked me. And I feel that for other ones who may be in the same place of like, you grew up maybe a little rough, or you grew up in a home with two parents and you're Black and you just feel this stirring for missions. Like, bro, like come. Like, come. I want to call you to participate in the Great Commission, the assignment that God has for his church. This is the mission of Jesus. This is Jesus's mission, the Great Commission, and to partner with that, and that there is a place for Black missionaries. Like, there's a place on the field for you. There's a place where what you carry and who you are and the uniqueness of our culture and our expression and our worship, our sound is meant to be knitted in in the nations with that sound to bring people into freedom and deliverance and healing, and to push the last frontier, you know, all across the Middle East, to give these ones the ability and the space to sing and offer incense before the Lord.
Prophesy.
So I want to call you into that. I want to invite you into that. Come. If you're thinking about it, even if it's small on your mind right now, come apply to one of our training programs here. Come and be in this family to be sent out, you know. And no matter what your background is, I want to call Black missionaries, the African diaspora all over the world. I'm calling you, come and take your place in this Black missions movement that God is raising up, that God is initiating. Yeah.
Let's go. Yes. Come on. And you know, hey, we're even looking at sending a team to your spot this fall. We'll pray about the crisis going on. We'll pray about the global conflict that's going on. But hey, if you're watching this and you're like, hey, man, I want to pull up at Jay's base and like, let's go for this. Sign up for a short-term trip. You know? So. Okay, awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us.
Thank you for asking. This is it's dear to my heart, so I'm glad I could do this.
We love you so much. Thanks for being a voice in our family and a voice in this generation. Sure. We get to do this.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the MAPS Global Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and check out previous episodes. Have you seen our 50 Hours documentary? Watch it now. And don't forget to sign up for our email newsletters.